Hey everyone, welcome back to RetroBreak and welcome to my top 15 games for the Nintendo 64. As always, to make this video a little bit more interesting, I'm not going to be including any Mario or Zelda games because, let's face it, including those would easily take up the top 5 spots, and I've got some really interesting games to share in this video. So with that said, let's get started. So game number 15 is a very interesting game for me personally. This is Gauntlet Legends, and the reason I included this is not really because of the N64 version. The version I always enjoyed was the arcade version, so when I was growing up I used to have ice skating lessons, and there used to be a few arcade machines in the ice rink where you put your skates on. So after every single lesson, me and my friends from there would go and play on the Gauntlet Legends arcade machine in 4-player, and it was so much fun. I absolutely loved that game. So one day, when I was going around a boot sale with my mum and dad, I stumbled across the N64 version, which at the time I didn't even know existed. So I was super excited, and my parents kindly bought me this, and I got home, put it in the N64, and I was not disappointed. It was literally like being in the arcade in my own home. And again, just like the arcade version, this can do all the way up to 4 players as well. It's such a fun game too. If you've never played Gauntlet before, they're very simple games. You basically just run around and defeat all the enemies and get to the end of the stage, but playing it with a group of friends, especially in the arcade, was just absolutely fantastic back in the day. And this N64 version's really good too. So if you want a really fun multiplayer experience for the N64 and you want something a little bit different to the regular party games, then definitely recommend Gauntlet Legends. Now, there was a lot of really interesting platformers for the N64, and there's a lot that I could have chose, but this is one that I actually got fairly recently. This is Chameleon Twist 2, and I was really surprised with what this game offered. To me, this game feels like what I wanted Yoshi's Story to be. It's a really fast-paced, kind of 3D platformer, but also at the same time still takes a lot of inspiration from 2D platformers as well. There's a really interesting mechanic where you can use your tongue to jump around the stages. I did also really enjoy Chameleon Twist 1 as well, actually, and I actually did a full video review on Chameleon Twist 1 about 7 or 8 years ago at this point, so if you want to see some old RetroBreak content, definitely go ahead and check that video out. I have no idea how well it holds up today, but I have to say that both the games hold up extremely well, although I do see myself going back and playing Chameleon Twist 2 more than the first one. And if you want a kind of unique platformer that's not your standard Mario, Rayman, Banjo-Kazooie kind of game, then definitely give this one a try. You might be surprised like I was. Number 13, and this is a really interesting game. I'm kind of hesitant to call it a 3D platformer. This is Space Station Silicon Valley. And this really is unlike anything else that I've played before. So basically, it's kind of a 3D platformer in the fact that there's sort of 3D worlds for you to explore, and you can kind of jump, I guess, but the whole gimmick and the premise of this game is the fact that you actually control a computer chip. And this computer chip can take the form of the various animals in the stages, and there's all kinds of different missions that you have to try and accomplish throughout these different challenging levels, and there's a whole host of different animals that you can sort of inhabit and use those to maneuver around the environments. It's such a unique game. I've never played anything like it before or since, and it really stands up to the test of time really well too. I played it again for capturing footage for this video, and it's still just as much fun today as it was back in the day for me. So highly recommend Space Station Silicon Valley, and it's got such a really weird and unique atmosphere to it as well. Really great game, honestly. Number 12, and an absolute classic for the N64 library, and quite possibly my favourite intro music of all time as well. This is Wave Race 64. And what can I say about Wave Race 64 that hasn't already been said? The thing that draws everyone into this game, and the thing that just absolutely amazes me still to this day, are the absolutely incredible water physics. This game just feels so good to play. Nintendo they were just on fire with this game. It's just absolute magic. It just feels so good, so responsive, and there's a lot of nuance to the controls as well, and that is what makes games like Wave Race 64 and kind of games like 1080 Snowboarding as well, which I didn't include on this list, but you can argue that either of these deserve this spot. There's just something about these Nintendo racing sports games that holds up so well today. In fact, Wave Race 64, I think, still holds up better than the GameCube one if you go back and play them both. I had so much fun revisiting this one. So yeah, absolute classic game, and I would love to see the Wave Race games come back in the future. Now for another racing game, and the N64 was just full of these. There was so many fantastic ones to choose from, but for a third party pick, my favourite of the bunch, and I know a lot of you watching really love this game too, that is Beetle Racing Adventure. And there's so much to love about this game. The controls are almost flawless for this kind of early 3D racing game. You always feel like you have total control over the kart. The braking and the drifting and just the steering in general just feels absolutely fantastic. But the thing that makes this game for me, one, I really love the long and winding courses. You can really get into a flow state with this game. And the second thing that I really love about this is all of the shortcuts that are built into the levels too. And that is something that N64 racing games did really well that's kind of missing from today's racing games, and that is all the many little paths and like secret jumps and stuff that you can find throughout these stages to give yourself that advantage in the race. And Beetle Racing Adventure is definitely the N64 racing game above most others, I should say at this point, that I go back to time and time again. Highly, highly recommend this game, it's just fantastic. Number 10, and I'm including this one for historical significance more than anything. This is the original Super Smash Bros. And this game, again, still holds up really well today. Sure, it's a little bit slow compared to some of the more modern Smash Bros games, but you really do get a sense of the fact that Sakurai and Hal knew exactly what they wanted to make with this game, and they absolutely hit the nail on the head from the very first entry. You can easily go back to this from playing Smash Ultimate and just jump straight in. It really doesn't feel that different at all. Of course, the roster of characters is much reduced, but it is just so interesting to see where such an incredible series got its start, and it's still so much fun to play today. And I also really loved playing this one in multiplayer back at uni as well. It does really hold up very well today. And I really think it's a very important game from Nintendo's history that more people need to check out too. Now for number 9, this is another multiplayer focused game that I also really loved playing back in college and uni, and this is Pokemon Stadium 2. And the main reason that I'm including this one is because the mini-games are just so much fun. If you've got a group of friends that really knows what they're doing, this can become so competitive. And as well as that, of course, the graphics are just absolutely mind-blowing for the N64. Honestly, the graphics in this game can easily hold their own against Colosseum and Gale of Darkness on the GameCube, I think so anyway. They just absolutely look incredible, and at the time I was just blown away with what I was seeing. And what I was hearing as well, of course. A lot of people really love all of the voice samples in Pokemon Stadium games. And it has a really fun single-player mode as well, if you do enjoy the Pokemon battling style. And of course you could transfer all of your Pokemon from Gold, Silver and Crystal, which of course I did a lot of back in the day as well. So if you are a Pokemon fan, you definitely owe it to yourselves to check out Pokemon Stadium 2, especially for the minigames, because they are so much fun to play with friends. Number 8 is quite possibly my most anticipated game for the N64 before its launch. I was such a huge fan of Banjo-Kazooie back in the day that when I was reading through all the magazines and when I first got access to the internet as a kid, there was one game that I went back to and read literally every single piece of information there was, and that was for this game here, Banjo-Tooie. And what an incredible sequel it is as well. I don't enjoy it as much as the first one, which we'll cover a little bit later on, but what is here is such an incredible follow-up to one of my favourite games of all time. The scale of this game is just mind-boggling. They went, in my opinion, a little bit too far with what they were able to do with this game. The environments, the levels, the navigation between them, everything is just so much bigger and more fleshed out over the original. But the reason that I loved this game back in the day was the atmosphere that it gave off. There's so many really interesting characters in this, and there's so many nods to what happened in the first game and how things progressed in the story. There's just so much to love if you're a fan of Banjo-Kazooie with Banjo-Tooie. Obviously today, it's a lot easier and better to play this game on the Xbox because the frame rate on the N64 version, my god is it bad. I never noticed back in the day, but playing it again to capture footage for this video, wow. I honestly believe that at some points walking around in the Jinjo Village hub area, the frame rate dropped into the single figures. It was that bad, but Honestly, as a game, I absolutely fell in love with it as a kid, and if you enjoy 3D platformers and you don't mind a little bit of a slog because of just the size and scale of some of these areas, then definitely give BanjoKazooie a try, you won't be disappointed. Now going from one of the biggest games on the N64 to one of the smallest, but also one of the most replayable, this is Pokemon Snap. And I love this game so much. As a kid and as an adult, this game is just so unique, it's so different to anything else that's out there, apart from the follow-up on the Switch of course, which I actually didn't enjoy as much as the N64 original. There's just something about this one that always brings me back, whether it's just understanding the levels in such minute detail that you know exactly what to do to bring out exactly the right Pokemon in exactly the right moments to capture the right poses. It's just so infinitely replayable despite the very few levels that this game actually has. And as a kid, I would love just wiping my save, playing all the way through to the end, go and visit Mew on the moon. Spoilers for anyone who hasn't played this. I absolutely love it, and I still quote some of the Professor Oak lines to this day. And of course, if you've played this game, you know why it's held in such high regard among Pokemon fans and retro gaming fans alike. So if you want something very different and you're a fan of Pokemon, definitely check out the original Pokemon Snap, especially if you've played the more recent one and want to see where they got its start. Especially if you've played the more recent one on the Switch, I still think this one would be really fun to go back and revisit today. Right, now we're almost down to the top 5. This is number 6, and this is probably my favourite entry in this series. This is Lylat Wars, also known elsewhere in the world as Star Fox 64. And this is very unusual for Nintendo. This is a very cinematic experience, and they honestly improved in literally every single aspect from the SNES game, which I also really love. This N64 one just blows that one clean out of the water. It has some of the smoothest flying controls out of any game ever, and I do attribute that to the fantastic analog stick on the N64. I've seen a lot of people recently complaining about the N64 controller and analog stick, but I honestly think for the games that it was made with, there is no good alternative to playing it on a proper N64 controller. I tried playing these games on the Wii U and the Wii Virtual Console, and more recently on the Switch and things like that, and they just don't feel right. You really need to play these games as they were intended with a proper official N64 controller to really feel just how well fine-tuned these controls are and how responsive they are. And it's not just the controls that are great about Lylat Wars. The different levels that you get to go through are just so individually unique and challenging and rewarding and replayable, and there's all sorts of different paths that you can take throughout the game. So although you can probably finish this game in around an hour and a half, there's so many different routes and there's so much replay value in this that it's exactly the kind of game that I love. Especially today with the limited free time that I have, having a game that you can just whiz through in around an hour is just absolutely fantastic, and I really don't think that should be a knock against any game, not just Lylat Wars. I honestly really value replay value, and just a really highly polished game like this one, it really stands very uniquely in Nintendo's lineup of games even today as well. I could honestly just gush about this game all day, so if you haven't played it, definitely check it out. And also check out the remake on the 3DS as well if you've got one. That was also a fantastic version of this game, and I really love the 3D effect on that one too. Now we're down to the top 5, and honestly it was almost impossible to order these ones. Any of these could have been my number 1 pick, but I managed to do it, so let's start with number 5. And this is an incredible game by Treasure. Again, it's a very, very unique game. This is Mischief Makers. And I actually only found out about this game at uni, so about 15 years after this game came out, I finally got the chance to play it for myself, thanks to a few friends at uni who recommended it to me, and I just fell in love with this game, and it's just quirky humour, it's really unique level mechanics. Basically every single level in this game plays almost completely differently, and again, it's infinitely replayable as well. And my girlfriend also loves this one. In fact, we did a full Let's Play of the entire game a few years ago when we first moved into our flat together. So definitely go ahead and watch that. I'll put a link in the description. I think it's still worth going back and watching today, but yeah. She was one of the people that introduced me to this game, and it quickly became one of my favourite games on the system. It's almost impossible to actually explain what this game is. It's kind of a 2D platformer, but it's also kind of a shooting game, it's also kind of a puzzle game. I really don't know how to classify this. It's very strange. And it's definitely one of Treasure's best and most unique games as well. And if that doesn't sell it to you, then I don't know what will, but definitely check it out if you want something just completely out there and unlike anything else you've ever played before. And the reason I keep coming back to this game as well is the fact that there's different gems to collect throughout all the stages, including beating all the bosses without taking any damage. And the more gems that you collect throughout the game actually increase the length of the ending, and I've never managed to get all of them, but I will do it one day. Number 4 is F-Zero X. I'm a huge fan of the F-Zero series, and I'm so sad that Nintendo's not done anything with it in so long. This one stands head and shoulders above the rest for me personally though. This is just futuristic racing simplified to perfection. There really is no other way of putting it. In some ways it's a very simple game, but that simplicity is key to making it endlessly replayable, and it runs at a silky smooth 60 frames a second, which is almost completely unheard of for the N64. Again, playing it with the proper N64 controller is the only way to fully enjoy this game. Honestly, I tried playing it on the Switch and it's just way too twitchy, so if you feel like maybe this game wasn't all that you were hoping it would be, try and get the N64 controller for the Switch Online if possible, if at all possible, because I promise you, it will make the game so much more fun to play. I played it again on the N64 after playing it on the Switch, and it's just a night and day difference. And it's still right up there as one of the best games that Nintendo's ever made, in my opinion. The music as well, the soundtrack to this game is just absolutely S-tier. It's a god-tier soundtrack, it really is. Every single level in this game, I just turn the volume up and just jam out to this game, especially playing it on master difficulty. I can just zone out, get completely in the zone and just get absolutely engrossed with this. It's so good. Definitely check it out if you like your futuristic racing games. And please Nintendo, if you're watching this, make a new F-Zero game. It's been far too long. Now, number 3 is Conkers Bad Fur Day. What an insane game this is. I honestly have no idea how this even got released. And I have a pretty funny story about this game as well, so yeah, I was hugely excited and anticipating BanjoKazooie, but the game that really got my attention as a 10-year-old kid at the time was Conkers Bad Fur Day, but there was no way my parents were going to buy this for me, and I begged and begged and begged for it, but they were adamant that I should not be playing a game that's for adults, and they'd seen all the oh, it's got bad swear words in it and stuff, so I ended up getting BanjoKazooie instead of Conkers Bad Fur Day. But honestly, I absolutely loved BanjoKazooie, and I've got nothing against their decision in hindsight, but I just think that's really funny, and honestly, because the price of this game just skyrocketed in the later years of the N64's life, I never actually managed to get it myself until my girlfriend bought it for me for Christmas, about 5 or 6 years ago at this point, and before I even played this game, she actually played it all the way through herself without telling me that I even had this. So when I got it, she watched me play it, and she already loved the game because she'd played the entire thing, and I just fell in love with it as well. It's so funny. This game brought me to tears at some points. I was just laughing so much. I know I would have absolutely loved it as a kid and a teenager, so I'm glad that I finally got to experience it, and it is incredibly different to all of Rare's other 3D platforming games. This one's not really a 3D platformer as such, it's more just of a weird and wacky experience that goes through all of these different sort of scenarios, and you're basically just along for the ride. It's just so fun, it's so funny, and I really want to go back and replay it soon. It really is such a unique game, and honestly I can't really see anything like this game ever being made ever again. It really is of its time. Maybe a lot of the humour is kind of iffy these days, but you know, if you think of it as a game from the early 2000s, I honestly think it holds up extremely well, and I think you will definitely get a kick out of it if you enjoy the really sort of quirky British humour that Rare was known for. They really dialed it up to 11 for this game. Oh, it was so difficult to choose between these two, but I'm sure you can tell what my number 1 pick is, because I've mentioned it a few times already. But my number 2 is possibly my favourite racing game of all time, definitely my favourite kart racer of all time, and I'm sure that just gave it away. No, it's not Mario Kart 64, it is of course Diddy Kong Racing. I fell in love with this game. I'm sure you can tell I'm a massive fan of Rare, or Rareware as they were known back in the day, and this game was the game more than anything else, more than even Mario and Zelda, which I said in the intro I wouldn't be including, but yeah, this is probably my most played game on the N64, and I absolutely love everything about it. It's a very you know, kiddie game, it's a very child-friendly game, but it really has a very, very steep difficulty to it. It wasn't until a few years ago, actually, that I actually managed to 100% complete it, but there's just something so magical about this game. I love all of the different environments. I love the hub world as well. I wish that games like Mario Kart had picked up on that and gave you more of a fleshed out single player mode to explore. I love all of the different challenges, all of the balloons you can find. It is very much a rare game in all of the different collectibles that you get throughout the game. There was just so much variety in this game as well, and I loved all of the characters. There literally isn't a single thing that I can think about this game that I don't absolutely love and think deserves a 10 out of 10. It really is, honestly, close to a perfect game for me, honestly. So if you love your kart races, if you love Mario Kart and you want something a little bit different, definitely go back and give Diddy Kong Racing a try. It's so sad that this will probably never see the light of day on a modern Nintendo console. I hope I'm proved wrong, and I hope it does come out on the Switch. Of course, there was also the DS version as well, which was nowhere near as good as the N64 one in my opinion, but maybe that's something you'd like to check out at some point as well. So yeah, highly, highly recommend Diddy Kong Racing. And now we are on to my number one game, and yes, of course you all saw this one coming. This is, of course, Banjo-Kazooie. And I've mentioned it many times on the channel in the past, but possibly second to Diddy Kong Racing, this is the other game that I put the most time into back then. Man, what an amazing game Banjo-Kazooie is. The scope of the game, I think, is absolutely perfect for the kind of game that it is. It never becomes overwhelming despite the insane amount of things to collect and do in the game. Every single level and every single character is so memorable. I grew up with these characters and they hold a very special place in my heart. I also love all of the different levels, all of the different music that accompanies the levels. The fantastic compositions by Grant Kirkhope absolutely stand the test of time today. And the game itself is just so well made, it's so unique, there's so many really interesting mechanics and power-ups and upgrades and characters, and oh, I just love it. I love it so much. I really can't put into words just how much of a perfect 3D platformer this game is. Obviously, people have tried to recreate the success of Banjo-Kazooie since, with things like Yooka-Laylee and a lot of other modern 3D platformers that take heavy inspiration from this game, but honestly, in my opinion, and I'm not just looking at this with nostalgia goggles on, nothing comes close to matching the perfection that is Banjo-Kazooie. Let me know in the comments whether you love the N64 as much as I do. I honestly, this console was my childhood, and I hate it when people say that the N64 had no good games. So hopefully this video has proved you wrong. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know down in the comments below what your top games for the system are. And if you want to see more top games, I've actually done a top games list for every single Nintendo console now except the Switch. So what do you want to see after the N64? Do you want to see NES or do you want to see SNES? I'll put two options up here for you to go to next. So thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, check out Patreon to join everyone going up the screen right now. So thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all again very soon. Goodbye.